Welcome back to Hot Flashes and Cool Topics podcast. Today we are going to have such a great conversation with our guest, Helen Slater. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
We're thrilled
Hmm.
you're here. And Bridget and I are really, the more conversations we have with women in our demographic, it's so joyous that we discover the richness in their lives. And I don't mean that monetarily, I mean that experientially. Like everyone is just growing and doing these creative things. And there's such great conversations. So I wanted to start today talking about the fact that you got your PhD last year.
I did. I defended my dissertation. And in fact, Daphne Zuniga, who you had on this show, I don't know how many episodes ago, she was there. She drove up to Pacifica Graduate Institute, as did a whole other bunch of my friends and my husband and my daughter, because the defense takes place, you have to present like a half hour. The way Pacifica Graduate Institute does it, you're presenting like a half hour PowerPoint and discussing one aspect of your dissertation. And it was really fun to have Daphne there and all my friends and my family, and the Zoom call in of people could Zoom in. So friends and family members came that way too. Yeah, it was quite amazing.
Oh, it's so nice just to have that much support from people. And what really prompted you to do this? What was your
I grew up in New York and New York City. I went to the high school for performing arts, which is, I don't know if you remember the movie Fame or the TV show Fame.
Oh, yes.
So, in fact, just for fun, because of all the connective little tissues, Erica Gimple, who starred in the TV version of Fame as Coco, is one of my dearest friends, and she also was at the defense of my dissertation.
Oh my goodness.
that is
So
so
it's like at all
nice.
these lines. But so when I was at the High School for Performing Arts, I was there for acting, and this is in 1979 is when I started in my sophomore year. And there was a program that was a little bit on its last legs. It was called the Bus and Truck Program, and it was original music. It was an original musical, or not quite yet original musical. It would be a show that 11th graders would audition for. They had been doing the same show for years and years. I think it was called Alice in TV Wonderland. And a new teacher came in and said, I want to take a fairy tale and I want to write original music. And he had heard me perform original music at a cabaret night. And he said, would you be interested in writing the music to Hans Christian Andersen's The Nightingale, or The Emperor's Nightingale? And his view was, which sort of began that opening of how fairy tale and myth can be such a beautiful way to help navigate periods of life that are difficult, whether you're reading the Greek myth of Demeter and Persephone, or Hansel and Gretel, or the Ugly Duckling, or doesn't matter what culture you're pulling from. These myths and fairy tales really can be almost like parables. So if biblical stories feel too heavy, a lot of times the same messaging or the same teachings can be found in a fairy tale or a folk tale. And the way that this bus and truck program was designed is he made the nightingale, or we all participated through improv, and then I wrote the lyrics and music too. It became almost a Christ story. So the nightingale became a Christ figure. The emperor, I don't know if you know the story, but the emperor
Not sure
was,
I know that one. Yeah.
oh, it's
Eh,
such a
yeah.
fantastic story. He's
I have
this
to find
very
it.
egoic emperor, very selfish, everything belongs to him. And the nightingale is this very plain bird who sings so beautifully. And he loves her voice, and he cages her when they bring her back to him and insists that she sing for him. And finally, she's let go. And as he's dying, he lets her go, and he has a mechanical nightingale built. You can just see all the implications of this, how we might try and feed the soul with things that aren't really the real thing, for lack of a better word. Anyway, the nightingale comes back and sings to him, and he comes back to life when he was at death's door. And then the way that he rules as an emperor completely shifts, and he comes from this place of love and generosity for the people of the land. And so that was this tiny little, I'm in 11th grade at Performing Arts High School, and I got very lit up by this idea that music can move us, that these stories can speak to us. If you didn't want to mainline biblical ideas or too much religious ideas, here were fairy tales, folk tales, myths that it was a little more obscure, a little more hidden, but you could still get these beautiful teachings on love, forgiveness, redemption, resurrection, all these ideas that, depending where you are in the pendulum from atheist to devout religious person, you would have something for you could be found when it's couched in that myth and fairy tale idea. Yeah.
It's
So,
so amazing that it stayed with you from the
well,
time
that's what I
you
was
were.
gonna
Yeah,
say. For
yeah.
a lot of women in our demographic, they're going back to finding things that they were passionate about. That's something that, like you
Mm.
said, sparked them. You had such a, and you still wonderful career in acting. Did you pick this up later in life and say, this is something it's kind of streamlined through my life, but now I want to really focus because your PhD is in mythology.
It
S-
is.
So, was it something you
So
picked up?
for me, it was always with me, and I'd be curious to hear from the other women you've interviewed, or even from both of you, that a lot of these inklings are like breadcrumbs in the woods. They're always with us, and then we get to a certain point where either we want to fan them or bring them up out in another way. For me, I wrote music. I was cast as Supergirl, then as in The Legend of Billie Jean, and then in Secret of My Success and Ruthless People, these very big roles in Hollywood where my career kind of took over for a while, but always during that time I was writing music. So over the next 30 years, 40 years, I was composing music. I had made 6 albums. I think I shared with you 3 of them were recorded, or maybe it was just 2. 2 of them were recorded in Nashville, Tennessee at County Q Studios. And 2 of the albums, one is based on The Ugly Duckling. The other one is literally called The Myths of Ancient Greece. And they take myths, the Ugly Duckling folktale, and then Myths of Ancient Greece, and I put those stories to music. So really, that can tell you how powerful something can happen to you in your teenage years, that even though it morphs into something different as you get older, if it really spoke to you in those younger years, it's wild to me how it can stay with you for your whole life.
And it's so amazing. I think that you were able to do something with it. And I would love to remind our listeners and women out there that don't forget, don't give up on those things that just sparked your interest. Because, I mean, I was an elementary school teacher, Colleen was a lawyer. And who knew? I mean, we're having a podcast about this time of life now.
How wonderful.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it is amazing what women can do. And just encouraging them to just go out, find that passion. And it does, if it doesn't work out, it's not a failure. I always say it's just
Yeah.
something that you tried, and you might find a different little way that it
Well,
meanders
you're
around it.
touching on a really interesting idea, which is famously Joseph Campbell introduced this idea of the hero's journey, or like these kind of rites of passage in order to become a whole person, or but that's not the heroine's journey necessarily. And in fact, I think, I don't want to make such a generalization, but feminine, let's say, the feminine hero. So you could be a man that's with the feminine quality, but let's just say women as a catch-all, or the heroine's catch-all, is more, I think, periods of inwardness. Things go spiral, as opposed to, we're going to go this, conquer this, do this, return to that, have a period of exile, and then we become whole. Or that more classical Odysseus, or, the male. I think women, they can have those elements, but it really isn't a straight line, our journey. And I think we're always staying, in general, there's a more, we're just more in tune with this interior piece, even if we can't put words to it. So those things where it's a dark period, or we can't find our way out, or we don't quite know. I have a lot of, in my dissertation actually is about this, about how we sit with periods of suffering, and sit with grief, and sit with those moments where we don't feel particularly ambitious, or don't have a clear vision for ourselves in this back third of our life that we may have had in the first two thirds. Yeah.
Do you find that in going through your PhD program that the myths spoke to you as you started to age, that there were certain things that were resonating over and over? Did you find patterns?
100%. And I would encourage anyone listening to this, or to both of you, that there are going to be stories that you're just like, I don't know what this is, but I just love this. Or you see a movie or you see something and you're like, I relate to that. So the two that show up in my dissertation, one is based on a Scottish tale, The Selkie and the Fisherman, and the other one is the Greek myth Demeter and Persephone. But just very briefly, the Selkie and the Fisherman is very much about, and I'm sure you've heard, the Disney version is The Little Mermaid. It's a Selkie sea animal. She comes, a fisherman sees her bathing with her sisters. She takes off her pelt and he falls in love with her, and he steals her pelt is the what happens, and he asks her to marry him, and he promises she can return to the sea after 7 years. She agrees to it, and after 7 years her skin starts to crack and she's very chapped and really wants to return to the sea, and he feels betrayed by this because they've had this beautiful marriage and they've had a child, and eventually she does return to the sea. I'm shortening this quite a lot, but as a metaphor, it has to do with listening to those inklings where maybe we do have to go more in, or it doesn't quite make sense why we're feeling we need to make a left turn, or not be necessarily with what the culture is asking us to do, or with how we're being conditioned to respond in a certain situation. And that myth of, or that folktale, the Selkie and the Fisherman, gives this lovely template for different ways that we might feel okay about what is organically or naturally happening to us, and not trying to squeeze ourselves into what the society might be saying we're supposed to be in this moment. So, yeah.
I think that's such a great message to women right now,
It's a
because
great myth.
it's a great message to women, just, or really anybody. Men can also, they feel like they have this role that they have to traditionally be a breadwinner or something like that. But
Yes.
women just saying that, you know, you don't have to be a mother if you don't want to be a mother. You don't have to, do these things. You don't have to be married, or you can be married, or,
Yeah. And then the question is, how do we just need so much encouragement, whatever that path is, like the idea of strong arming your way through a period of life, that in fact I think that is why friendships become so meaningful, or even the spouse, or communities, certain whatever it is, that we really need that support, and people that reflect maybe our unique strange thing at any given moment, to have that encouragement to keep going. You're doing okay, or yeah.
How important, we've spoken to some of your friends actually. How important has the female friendships been for you as you start to get older?
I mean, I think you could write a dissertation on that.
The power of female friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm sure both of you can relate to this, that not all friendships stay. And there are some that really are with you for a lifetime, some that are with you for a lifetime but become almost like siblings, where you just accept that you're in a different place. Then there are just those wisdom friends. They might be a few years older than you, or just because of who they are, when you're in their presence, you just feel like you can open your heart and speak so truthfully. And that variety, I don't think it's a one size fits all. And yeah, I mean, super interesting to how we walk with our friends through their difficult periods, how friends walk with us through our difficult periods. That but without, I think I personally rely on very much this fellowship of women in my life, for sure. Yeah.
Well, just having them show up for you for your dissertation
Yes. Oh my
That I
God.
mean,
So
you know,
amazing.
that sounds so amazing that this community showed up for you
It
because
was. And one of my friends, I
yeah.
mean, they were all sitting there. I have one particular friend, I look up, I'm like halfway through with the PowerPoint, the images of the tree and the path and whatever it was. And I look up and I see one of my friends and she's just sobbing, like could not
Oh,
stop crying,
Oh,
which I took as a great show of support.
you just like you're so proud of someone. I mean, I've done that. You're so proud of somebody, you're just
Yes.
overcome with
being there.
emotion that you're just so happy for
Yeah.
them. And I think that's a great thing about this time of life, too, because I think of so many women that we have encountered are so happy for the success of another woman that
Yeah.
they're cheering them on. It's very rare that we find someone that is not happy for the success of
No.
the other woman. And I think that's a really beautiful thing that we found just through doing this podcast. And
And
it's really
everyone's
amazing.
kind of doing it differently. Some people really do feel driven to keep going in a more creating things, accomplishing things, almost like that vertical thinking, but that really speaks to them. It gives them joy, gives them that feeling of meaning. And then I have other friends where it really is just kind of a quieter, things are blooming, but they may not be as obvious. They're a little more interior based, or just the range is pretty spectacular, how people are walking walking each other home, as Ram Dass says.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's true because there's, we find so many listeners say, I feel invisible. I feel not
Mm,
heard, not seen. But in our conversations with so many women, we find that they're finding their own paths. It doesn't have to be a huge look at me, look at me. I'm,
yeah,
CEO of a company, or maybe it is, but it's finding those moments of peace, of fulfillment, of
yeah,
joy, and then bringing your friends along with you to see that that's yours. Their paths may be different.
yeah, that's beautifully said. And I would even add to that that my understanding is that when we are in that place of receptivity or peace, or practicing having a rendezvous with things that put us in that state of mind, that does have an effect with those that are around us. But it does take effort to say, I'm going to take the hike in the morning and really just take in these birds and what's going on in the path, or I'm going to really slow down with that cup of tea, or read a passage of whatever sacred text or a myth, whatever it is, and that you can just feel the mind pivoting and resting down a little. And then I do think that has, like the butterfly effect, I think rippling in ways that may not be seen, but profoundly affects the community, and who knows what, going all the way
Mhm.
to, yeah.
That's very true. And I know that we have to at least touch on your very busy career in
Sure.
acting, because they would be like, why didn't you ask about Supergirl? So they'll get mad at me. So you started very young. We talked about that. You were in the performing arts in high
Yes.
school. I think your first was an after school special
Yes, Amy and the Angel.
with some heavy hitters, Meg Ryan and
James
Matthew
Earl
Jones.
Jones and Matthew Modine, and I mean, like
So
crazy.
starting simply, you just kind of,
Yeah.
and then you dove right into Supergirl when you were 18. Can you
Yeah.
talk about what that was like? Because you got to actually have conversations with Christopher Reeves about it. It was 4 months of training. You're 18 years old. Luckily, social media is not around at that point. But what was the experience for you like?
Well, it's interesting because when I was in high school, we weren't really allowed to work. Some of us took a job here and there, but part of the performing arts ethos was you're going to get this training, and it was rigorous. It was half the day was acting class, movement, voice and diction. So I was chomping at the bit to not go right into college and to see if I could get work as an actor. And I think when you're 18, you kind of have these blinders on. You can't see the consequences or pitfalls. So it was just pure drive to try and get work, and totally committed to it as if I was still in high school. That was just that passion, and no matter what the script, no matter what the audition, working on it in the way that I had learned to work on it at Performing Arts, treating it as depthfully, these TV auditions and movie auditions, as if it was Chekhov, or as if it was, so it had that kind of innocent, yeah. So being cast as a superhero, I didn't totally think, I didn't know, it didn't square with anything, it didn't fight with anything. It was just like, well, that's the role. Like, that just seemed incredible to get a job that soon out of high school. And in that way, I didn't really see much difference of that and what I had been learning in high school. It just seemed to be all part of that same thing. You had your work ethic, I met these incredible people in England. There was isolation. I was living by myself, but I made friends through the man who coached me, Alf Joint. He brought my stunt double, Tracy Eden, Tracy Michaels now, who's still a dear friend of mine. So she became like someone who I could be friends with. But yeah, definitely isolating, and friendship, and in a new country, and kind of eyes wide open, and so grateful, so happy that I had gotten work out of, like, that was the dream and it had happened. I think that kind of describes.
It's so wild that that's become this cult classic. And I know that you go to different Comic Cons and things like that. How is that? Like, has that been kind of a continuous thing, or when did that kind of start?
In I would say the last 10 years, I started going to Comic Cons. Maybe it's even been a little longer now. And weirdly, Supergirl is certainly the reason they say they want me. But I would say the fans, it's almost equal or even more for The Legend of Billie Jean, which was this, I think because they were just running it on TV so much that this different generations just grew up with this modern Joan of Arc story. And it's great. I've told people that when you're at these events, what's so moving is the stories that you hear. It's not even like, you were so great in that. I mean, of course there's that piece, but there are things like, my father was very sick and he was at the end of his life, and we were watching movies, and this was a movie that, so things like that where your heart just opens immediately, and very, very moving. Yeah.
It's interesting because it's a timeline in your life, but it's also a timeline in everyone who's watching it. And people remember, I was doing this, I was giving birth during this one, and it's a moment in time, which is really kind of a nice memory to have with stuff like that. Did you feel like, because you did hit the ground running, so to speak, play on word, because you were Supergirl, did you feel like you had to keep the momentum going, or did you kind of take it as it came with each role?
In the beginning, it was just so dazzling and overwhelming to be shot out like that and be working so much in those first 5-6 years in my 20s, like from my teens to my mid to late 20s. And then there were some, like, it started to fray a little. I didn't love the feeling of fame. I just wasn't a natural at that. I felt uncomfortable. The privacy thing just seemed so strange, even though I'm not looking any gift horse in the mouth. It was just genuinely how I felt. It just felt so odd to not have your privacy. So there were little moments like that that started to puncture the kind of dream of it. And then it takes years and years, and being in therapy and meeting a wonderful husband and having a daughter and writing making these albums and working throughout. I never stopped working. It kind of went a little more underground, but it became more right-sized for my thing. So to have that big crash in the beginning, I didn't feel as joyful as it was in the very, very beginning. It started to get uncomfortable. Probably a psychologist could say why. I mean, as a mythologist, I could say why. But I'm sure there's something developmentally happening that if you're too exposed and the psyche doesn't have time to repair or to turn in or to navigate it, I mean, I think there's very few people that navigate it very well and come out the other side feeling, for lack of a better word, normal. And I kind of had a thing of really wanting to feel normal, or like, I don't know, whatever that was. Maybe from writing The Nightingale, The Empress Nightingale, when I was in high school, just understanding so profoundly the thing of someone who has so much material wealth is nothing if you don't have a soul, or if you're not connected to something that has deep meaning. So probably that had some kind of effect on me. Yeah.
I think that comes through though in the roles, that I've seen you in. There's some kind of innocence about your characters. And my
Wow.
favorite that you've been in is Ruthless People.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and I think that I think it's this innocence or something that just
Mm.
kind of comes through. I don't know, but I mean, you've been in so many movies with some really big, I mean, that movie, Bette Midler,
Yeah.
Danny DeVito.
Danny DeVito,
I'm
sure.
like, oh my goodness, how was that?
Well, incredible. I mean,
Mhm.
Bette Midler was just a force to be reckoned with, and so helpful. You learn early on when you're on a set, just there are actors, especially when you're younger and they're older, and they'll just help you, just be generous with you. And she really was of that kind. And I had met the Zucker brothers when I was making Supergirl in England at Pinewood Studios. They were filming, I guess, Top Secret with Val Kilmer. So we were all on the Pinewood lot. And um, that it was just like one of those, I'm sure, good fortune things that 2, 3 years later, when they were then doing Ruthless People, that I had met them back then. So that had a nice little synchronicity, or re meeting people you knew
Mhm.
back in England.
I also, you were interviewed recently and they asked you about Faye Dunaway. And it was really interesting that you talked about how she was very aware of the lighting. And she
Yes.
was she was maybe in her 40s at the time, but that a lot of actresses are very aware of the camera and the lighting. Can you talk about that and how it affected? Because it didn't seem like you really cared either way.
Well, when you're younger, I don't think you care at all, because you're just floating in estrogen or drowning in estrogen, and there's just like collagen for days. It's hard when you get older, I think. I mean, I, what do I feel about this? I really respect women that take care of themselves. Like, there's nothing wrong with figuring out the lighting. Like, she probably felt, rightly so, that she was on that movie for maybe 4 weeks. We were on it for 7 months, right? So she's coming in doing her thing. So can the DP be as tuned in to what she might need if she had been in every shot of every frame? Probably not. I mean, this is me just guessing. So she had developed that skill of, I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to make sure that and I've seen that with our other actresses too. Yeah. Who was that? I was just talking to somebody who said just they were not taking care of her on the set. When you get older, they can just put you in a category that they're not going to spend the same amount of time of, I guess,
Huh.
prettifying or beautifying. Yeah. It's
Wow. Do you
crazy that it's part of our business, but it kind of is.
do you find that, and I'm not really trying to bash men, I always say that, but do you find that men might get more attention than a woman at a
For
certain age on a
lighting.
set for anything, like you said, making them look
Oh,
their best or do their best or
I don't,
any
that hasn't been my experience. And I
okay.
have been working so much less now. Like, the last thing I was on was the Supergirl TV series. And then I did a small thing in The Flash. And because it was so minimal what I was doing, I felt like I had the thing of going in, coming out, and my mind not really focused as much on these things that we're even talking about right now. But
Mhm.
I had that feeling probably in my 40s, where when I saw something that I did, I'd be like, oof, I guess that's what I look like.
Oh man.
That kind of adjustment, like, all righty, that's how we
Like
look
that's
now.
you mentioned that one of the happiest times was when you were in grad school. And I'm sure some people would be like, wait a second, she was in Supergirl, she was famous. But why was it going back to school and fulfilling that need to learn more such a great time in your life?
Oh my goodness. I I can't recommend enough that if you love learning, or if you there's something you want to learn about, that to be in a program that you value is certainly, it's one of the high points of my life. Everything that I loved, I had studied Jungian, Carl Jung's writings and Marion Woodman and Louise von Franz, and came into more of James Hillman's writings, which was hugely throughout my dissertation. He came after Jung, but he was a Jungian, and Lionel Corbett and these writings. And all I can tell you is in concert with these folk tales and myths and epic poetry, the Odyssey, the Iliad, Moby Dick, endless world mythology, it had this feeling of just coming home. I wasn't trying to like squeeze myself. Oh, I have to shoot a movie in Luxembourg. Luxembourg's incredible. I have a week off. I'm going to take a train here, and making these marvelous bouquets wherever I was in life. I did feel I could do that. I could. This was the whole thing, was just a giant bouquet. I had nothing to add or to take away, or I'm going to make sure I get it was right all. It's as if falling into a pot of jam. That's your tasty, like what your number
Your
one
favorite.
thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
With that, and then also you are an accomplished pianist. And was that something, were you always focused on saying I want to be an actor, or did you want it to kind of merge everything together, the musical part, the
I mean,
academic?
I felt that composing was probably the closest until I started writing papers and my dissertation. Before that, I would say composing music had the most direct line to what was meaningful to me. So in my albums, in these story albums, The Ugly Duckling or The Selkie, that kind of was uh, that always felt like it was in the second position to acting, because what I was doing was, it wasn't really commercial. It's very singer-songwriter, very interior, almost like song cycles. But it was such a creative, soulful thing for me that I started to see like, oh, this, or I never pursued it as a commercial endeavor. It just felt like something that would make me, just it just was so satisfying to write that kind of music. And I didn't try, and I mean, CD Baby, I made the CDs. I did do some performing out, but it wasn't in the cards, I guess, to be plucked in that direction and be like a full-time singer-songwriter. Nonetheless, it was very, and is still very precious to me as like an art form, or yeah.
Right. It's like it's feeding your creative soul. I mean, it really
At
is. Like,
times.
yeah,
Although
yeah.
during grad school, I've talked with other friends, just and other composer friends, where you just have these long periods of not writing, not playing, because your attention is just so somewhere else. Like when I was in grad school, that happened for sure. I wasn't writing music, and yeah, so
Right.
it goes like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now that you've had 6 albums, you've had a great acting career, you now have your PhD. What's next? What are you looking forward to doing next? Or are you just going to just sit and enjoy all
I
that you've
know.
done? Because you've been busy, so
You've done a
So
lot.
I defended my dissertation a year ago. It's just past the 1 year mark. And it's been an unusual year of feeling very liminal, like on the outside, not feeling driven to jump into something or even pursue acting work. I'll have auditions that come in, and I have to say, it just feels like a shirt that doesn't fit quite right. Like I'm a size 10 and it's a size 6. Like it's just so that feeling of nothing quite feeling quite right. And then people asking that question, what are you going to do with the PhD? And not feeling like throughout the year, just not knowing, like, gosh, I don't know how to answer that. I don't feel like jumping into teaching. There's something that would be wonderful to teach myth and psychology, depth psychology, or try and create a bus and truck program in a performing arts school in LA. So these things were kind of satelliting, but nothing was gripping. And it certainly didn't feel right to drive it through So that it's had that quality of just not knowing. There's a beautiful Christian mystic text called The Cloud of Unknowing, and it's that the author is anonymous, but that title can kind of give you that the whole feel, like the cloud of unknown, like you just don't get to know. And I've had that feeling. And recently, a friend of mine who's edited and is about to publish a book of Jungian essays on AI, he had a template for a book proposal. And I was talking to him and I said, can I just see the template and I'll just plug in my dissertation, how I might convert that into a book. And I did just finish the proposal, the rough draft, turning the dissertation into a book. And we'll see. I'm waiting to get feedback from him on how the proposal can be better. I think I'd like to send it to one of the professors, but that's something that might be coming down the pike, where it would be taking what I worked. I mean, it ends up being like 5 years, I guess, and then making that into a book. But we'll see. Nothing feels 100% like I've got it. I know. It's more like maybe
And
this
I
would be
think
good.
that's a gift at this time of life. That's a gift because it's like you don't have to jump in there. If it's not
Yeah.
speaking to you, then there's
Yeah.
maybe you're just like, okay, I'll just hold
There's a
on to
lot of
it.
that kind of feeling, like we drop it to the ground and then see what comes up. Drop it to the ground, see what comes up. I've been in this movement class for a year with David Bridell, who founded the Clown School and was the head of the drama department at USC. And the movement class is not clown based. It's very kind of modern movement, improvisation with certain playwrights or certain styles of theater throughout the last 100 years. And that was so joyful for a year. I could just show up. I don't have to know anything. I don't have to present a paper. I don't have to just move your body, follow the prompts. And there was something very freeing about that. And I called it doggy daycare to a friend of mine. I'm going to doggy daycare on Friday. It was like from 10 to 1. I just show up in my
Yeah.
clothes you can move around in and leap around and roll around. Yeah.
I
So,
would think your brain I would think after doing that and having to defend a dissertation that your
yeah.
brain just might need a little bit of
Oh my gosh. And this
yeah.
and the moments of like crazy, I'm sure you've experienced this, just like stress.
Mhm.
I had a thing before submitting where the actual document, the formatting kept having little, like right before you press send and you're submitting the
Mhm.
just something would happen. A paragraph, as I'm just scrolling through, it would just go like a little to the
Oh
left or to the,
no.
and I had a company I hired to, they do, it's like just for formatting. And it was very well formatted because we were taught how to do it, but you just are so nervous that nothing worked. And I had a friend come and sit with me. We went through all the changes we looked at the whole thing. She was on a laptop. I was on this computer. And then I was flop sweating, like you just crazy stress. I took like 3 deep breaths and pressed send. But there was something in the unpredictable nature just when you think yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Wow. My daughter's getting her PhD in clinical psychology, and
Ah,
she's in year
wonderful.
3, and she's just getting the dissertation team
Yeah.
together. And as soon
Yes.
as she
That's
starts,
a whole process. My God.
Mm. Uh,
it's so all consuming, and but she's has such a passion, and it's like you,
Beautiful.
it radiates out from you, and it radiates it's really a wonderful thing to watch. And what would you say to women? We talk about privileges that we've
Mm,
earned at this stage of life. What would you
that's
say to
interesting.
some of the listeners are the privileges that you feel like you have earned? You know, we always talk about not having to be in a rush to get somewhere, not feeling like you have to accomplish everything on your to-do list. Hard-earned things that that we get to take for granted.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, I think the balancing act is sometimes we're definitely called to be more active in the world. That's just what's true. We have a trip coming up, or we're taking care of a parent, or doing something, and we're called into that kind of action. We naturally or maybe cranky just are called that way. So I can't say 100% it's about releasing and letting go and just letting things, not doing that, because there are things that are still calling us in the world. But I would say the privilege that I've earned, although that language is tricky, but okay, would be not turning away from the things that might have scared me throughout my life, being willing to just stop and take a seat, which is in the title of my dissertation, in whatever is happening in any given moment, and offering some kind attention to whatever that is. So if it's, we still get jumped at 60 years old. I still get jumped. It's crazy that this is true, but I can still get jumped by some of the same things from when I was 20 or 40 or 50 or in my 30s. But how I'm navigating that now with a little more kind of a vow. Pema Chodron talks a lot about this, the Buddhist teacher, about like you're not giving up on yourself. So this idea, like, here it is, I'm not going to react in the same way or make it worse. And I really do have a vow for the back nine. It's my friend Helen Hunt says, the back nine, that I don't want to make things worse. And this time next year, if I am, let's say, super anxious or feeling I keep getting caught by the same thing, like, whatever it might be, with a person, with a situation, I want that to be less the feeling of it. I can't control how it's going to come in, but with that kind of practice, spiritual practice, whatever it might be for anyone, for me, it's that the same thing that might have put me at a 10 this time next year, I really hope I can manage, it'll be a 7, or I can put a hand on my heart and just go like, oh, there, here we are again. Gosh, I wish it had gone differently. All right, before we pick up the phone, or before I just make it worse, what can I do to just diffuse that feeling of
so important.
the squeeze?
It's, we don't have to accept every invitation into something.
Yeah.
That's a great way of putting it.
We just don't. I mean, in our 20s, we were looking for it. We're like, bring it on. And now it's like, do I really want to step into so that?
Mm-hmm. And I think that we all have people in our lives, like I said at the beginning of this, that are encouraging us or model for us or are there for us in a way that is a little bit downshifted. It's not going to be, I don't know if you've experienced this, but there are people where there really is catastrophe after catastrophe or difficulty after difficulty. Not that we're not going to try and be there or all the things, but when you just start to get a little adjusting in the perception of what's happening, I don't know how to describe it other than this. Well, one way, and I don't want to talk politics, but for myself personally, just about even what we're intaking every day, just how we're intaking things and starting to connect the dots like, oh, if I keep drinking from that well, I actually don't serve my nervous system very well, or, can I take a fast from this for a little while? And that can be with drama, like drama with family members, drama with, like, can I maybe just take a break? We're just going to do like a,
right. I changed the channel.
A little
changing
fast.
The channel
yes.
from the news. Yeah. But we had someone on a few weeks ago, Dr. Mary Anderson. She wrote a book called The Happy High Achiever. And she called that easy people and uneasy people.
Oh,
and
I love that.
I loved it because I thought, oh, that really speaks to me. Sometimes it's, you don't like to cut people off, even if the uneasy people are in your family. But
sometimes you can't cut them off.
Yeah. But
true.
That was such a good way to describe it.
I love that. Easy, because
you got your easy people that you're just like, oh, like Colleen. I can tell you. I'm like, oh, Colleen.
I have that too.
Yeah.
I would even go a step further, maybe. I don't know if this would resonate, but that sometimes the uneasy thing people are like our greatest teachers because they show us how reactive we are. And it becomes, well, how can I work with my reactivity? Let them be who they are, but how can I work with this propensity or this habit of always either, however it's going to be, feeling responsible for them or feeling angry, or how can I, or scared, how do I work with these aversive feelings so that I'm not going to be able to heal someone who's really down in a hole, but maybe by not reacting in the same way, it doesn't make it worse for them either. That kind
Right.
of,
Mm-hmm.
It's just
I've been reading, the Daily Stoic. I have been every
oh,
day.
wow. Is that
Yeah.
Stoics like from
Way
long,
back in
long
the day.
time
Yes.
ago?
Yes.
It's
Wow.
We've had several guests that have been on over the
that really
past couple
follow
of years that
stoicism.
follow stoicism, and
Interesting.
it's really
The reaction. Yeah, it
resonates.
is. It's how you react. It's such like what you really only have control over three things,
Your
and it's your
reaction.
reaction, your reputation. Now I can't even remember the other one, but
Yeah.
Yes.
it is a big one is reaction and how you
Yeah.
react. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't even know, like I said, it's still same old me from 40, 50 years ago, but I am kind of holding it differently so that if I used to get struck with that feeling, I used to feel, well, I'm going to do these four things, or I'm going to have to, and now I feel more like, can I just be with this experience that probably so many other people share also, that feeling that you're getting it wrong, or you've blown it, or however it presents same old self from, yeah.
Right. Looking at it from a different lens is
Mm-hmm.
so, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that comes with wisdom and life experience. That's just, people will say, well, why can't we learn it earlier? Well, we just don't have the life experience to apply
No.
to a lot of things. So my last question is, of course, about menopause. How was your menopause experience? Can't, I would be remiss not to
If you
ask.
did, no, of course. Looking back, because I'm 60 now, so I feel it went on for quite a while. I'm going to say, so to count the perimenopause, it's going to have to be mid 50s is when it started, or I'm sorry, early 50s, maybe even late 40s for perimenopause. So for the last 10, 12 years, it's been. Um, the one thing I'll say that I found so interesting, I'm in a long-term marriage. We're married 35 years. And what I noticed that was like a clear, well, this isn't a head cold, and this is not a blister on my elbow. This is like really interesting. And what it would be is we'd be talking about anything, where to put a vase, or what movie we should see tonight, or how we, and he's such a fun, wonderful companion. We just would have like a little give and take, and we'd go back and forth. And that was how it was forever until what I'm going to say, part of the gift of menopause, I would have this incredible rage come up, and just, I couldn't believe it. I wouldn't start screaming, nothing like that, but I would be like, say things like, well, I don't feel that way. I don't want to see the Tom Hanks movie. No. And it would be like, I don't know what I was saying until that moment, because I might have been, but it had that feeling of like, but I'm just going to repeat again. The vase should go under the right bookcase, and we will put a flower. It was like as if I had to just speak more clearly, but I didn't feel I was getting run over, but I was acting as if, I did feel like something was being threatened, but I'm telling you, hand to God, it absolutely was not. But the feeling was, I must say what I need or what I want, or that more flexibility thing seemed to take a hike. That and
Yes. We've heard many women say,
Oh
all of a
yeah.
sudden he started chewing. And I was like, why are you chewing
Why are you
that
breathing?
way?
yeah,
Are you
And
snoring?
And the other piece I would say is I just wanted to be in nature as much as possible, like on my morning hike or going to the beach once a week or looking at a tree. I just found that was such a restorative act. It kind of short circuited just being in nature, and a lot on my own, like hiking by myself or going to the ocean before meeting friends and just sitting there for like half an hour. And that just seemed to skip over maybe that kind of thing that we've been talking about this whole hour, where you just get so reactive. You can't, there's no space in between what's happening, how you're feeling. Yeah.
Helen
I think
Slater,
alone time.
Yes, alone time.
Alone time is so important. And I noticed
Yes.
that was something when I was going through this, that I really valued my alone time.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Because it's hard for a lot of people to be alone. It's really hard for a lot of people to
Yeah,
sit.
I have a friend who said like she will never be alone. Like if something ever happened, God forbid, to her husband, I'm going to get married again. She's like,
and I'm like,
I don't want to be alone.
I'm
No.
like, I'm not.
No.
I'm like,
Oh
I'm
no.
not. I'll take care of him. I've been married to him
Yes.
for 33
33
years.
years and
Oh
32.
wow.
So we get
Oh
it.
Yeah,
wow.
we
So
get
we're in the
it.
same boat.
Yeah. But I said, I'm invested in him. If something happens, I'll take care of him because I've been with him. But I've watched too many other people, and I hate to say this,
No
become
desire.
a nurse with a
Yeah.
purse. And
Yeah.
I'm,
Oh my.
yeah.
What
I'm
were,
like,
can I just hear for you, menopause? Like, was there one or two things that defined it for you, or was it?
oh, I really went through everything. Like I had the hot flashes, night sweats, moods,
Oh, okay.
weight
Yeah.
gain. I had it all.
Mm.
Brain fog was really hard for
Yeah.
Yes.
me.
Brain
That's a
fog.
That's,
good
Yeah.
one.
and I don't, they say, oh, I'm postmenopause now. So is Bridget. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, it comes back. And I'm like, not completely.
No.
There's still,
I do feel different from, but it got mushed with COVID too. Like I didn't know how much of COVID and that isolation was affecting mood. And I'm
True.
one of the few people that really loved being in lockdown and off the hook to have to being out in the world.
Yeah.
I don't know if you should
right.
cut this
I'm
out
right. No,
because
I'm
it's
right
such
there
a
with you.
I got my kids back. So the empty nest really hit me hard, and they both came
Oh
back for a
wow.
while.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and
Because I
so
think
that
we all
helped.
have daughters from 1995.
Oh
Yeah, my
yeah,
daughter
yeah,
was born
mine
So
did.
we
95.
all have
Yeah,
daughters in 95. So they
yeah,
all
Interesting.
came, well, I can't say they all came back. Ours came back.
yeah.
My daughter didn't come back, but I mean, she was in Brooklyn, but we were communicating. But it was more just my own feeling of I don't know.
It
Yeah,
didn't, yeah,
It's
it didn't
just
bother me too much
it
either. I have
really
to be
didn't.
honest.
yeah.
Yeah,
Was, I must be a
Maybe that's a
homebody.
privilege too, like that we got to. I heard one thing. I think this. She's a scholar writer, Diane Kafta, I think is her name. That she said in the medieval time with the first plague, that was when all the monasteries were springing up, and it was this just blooming of interiority, because the plague, people couldn't be out and about in the same way, but in the monasteries there was all these writings going on, these contemplative, the mystics like Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, they had these great contemplative, beautiful writing period. And they think, I mean, I guess maybe out of COVID too, there was this interior something
like a creativity just kind of took off at that
of
time.
interiority,
Already,
not being
yeah,
out in the
Right.
world.
Right.
yeah,
But
But
of our own personal
yes,
kind of journeys, which is,
yeah.
I hope something came out of it for that for a lot of people, because I
Oh,
think
I
it
know.
mentally it was really hard
Oh
for a
gosh,
lot.
no
I think it
question.
was
No
a lot of
question.
the isolation, and I'm
And the
curious
younger
what.
generation,
Oh
I
Oh,
think,
yeah,
was
100%.
so hard.
I mean, yeah,
oof.
especially the college and high school
Oh
age,
my
and
gosh.
just
Yeah.
Rites of
the
passages that they
yes
weren't
that
allowed
you
to do.
missed. Yeah,
Yeah.
I really feel for them. And I now Colleen and I had just started the podcast like 5 months before.
Oh,
So
wow.
we had that. We actually got a lot of guests because people
We're home.
wanted to talk to other people and they
We're
wanted to
home.
talk. So we really it if I don't know if I hadn't had the podcast, it would have been, I think, more difficult because
Ah,
That's
I had
true.
that to do.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Gave
I
us a
had that.
purpose.
Right. Mhm.
Well, thank you so much, Helen Slater, for coming on
Yes,
this show.
thank
This was
you.
a joy. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your wisdom. And congratulations on your PhD. That
Thank
is
you.
awesome. We can't wait to see if you're going to do something or if it's just for your own personal fulfillment.
Thank
It's
you. I
going to be
appreciate that.
great.